Picture this. A semi-truck, headlights blazing, horns screaming, barreling straight at a sleeping man in a pickup truck. He wakes up mid-nightmare, convinced his life is over. He screams. He loses control of his own body. And the person laughing hysterically in the driver's seat next to him? That's me. This is the story of how I convinced my bully he was about to die, and I've never regretted a single second of it. If you've ever worked for someone who made your life hell, someone who thought their paycheck gave them the right to humiliate you, you're going to love this one. Stick around, because by the end of this video, karma doesn't just knock on the door, it kicks it in. Smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and let's get into it. My name is Ryan. Back in the early 2000s, I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school, and I landed what felt like the opportunity of a lifetime. A job in the Canadian oil patch. Understand something. This wasn't just a job. This was the job. Minimum wage back then was barely $6 an hour. I was being offered $20. No experience required, no education required, just a willingness to work hard in the middle of nowhere. To an 18-year-old kid with zero prospects, that number felt like winning the lottery. The work was called well testing. In simple terms, you hook up pressure tanks and flare stacks to brand new oil and gas wells, then monitor the data while the well flows. The setup and teardown is brutal, physical labor. The middle part, the actual testing, is quieter. Gauges, numbers, computer logs. It's a strange rhythm of exhausting and mind-numbing, back-to-back, for 12 or 24 hours at a stretch. You work in two-person crews, one laborer, one supervisor, and for 3 months, my supervisor was a man named Gary. I want you to picture Gary clearly, because you're going to need to hate him for this story to land the way it should. Gary was in his mid-50s, overweight, out of shape, and functionally allergic to physical labor. He'd help with the things too heavy for one person to lift alone, pipes weighing over 200 pounds, but that was the extent of his contribution. The rest of his day was spent in the crew trailer, watching DVDs, napping, and typing a few lines of data into a computer once an hour. Meanwhile, I was outside, doing the actual work. And Gary was mean, not the harmless. Ribbing between coworkers, kind of mean. The kind that's dressed up as a joke, so you can't call it out without being told you can't take a joke. I wasn't a small kid, 6'1", but I had a baby face, and back then, I didn't have an ounce of the confidence I have now. Gary picked up on that instantly, the way bullies always do. He found the soft spot, and he pressed on it over and over. One day, Gary discovered I'd never used a power drill before. His response wasn't patience. It was a sneer. Didn't your dad teach you anything? I made a mistake that day. I told him the truth, that my father had only been in my life for a handful of years growing up. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a flicker of decency. What I got instead was worse. The next time I fumbled a task, Gary didn't miss a beat. No wonder your dad walked out on you. I felt that one land somewhere deep. I called him out on it, told him that wasn't okay. And just like every bully in the history of bullies, he shrugged it off with the same tired defense. Can't you take a joke? Here's the part that made it worse. We worked far outside of town, which meant every night we ate dinner together in whatever small-town restaurant or bar was nearby, and Gary drank, not socially, heavily, nightly, without exception. He could actually be pleasant when he was 2 drinks in, but he never stopped at 2, which meant every single morning I was the one driving his truck to the job site while he slept off the whiskey in the passenger seat like a bloated, snoring corpse. Now, here's where it gets particularly unfair. Gary was paid mileage, $1, sometimes $1.10, per kilometer we drove. And we drove a lot, 100 to 350 kilometers a day, every day for weeks. That money went straight into his pocket. Me, I got minimum wage for travel time. I was doing the driving. He was collecting the check, and when I so much as suggested he might toss a few dollars my way for the effort, I found out exactly how well Gary handled being told no. I'm not a person who reacts quickly. I go quiet. I absorb. I've dealt with bullies my whole life, so by that point, I had a high tolerance for taking abuse and saying nothing. But everyone, and I mean everyone, has a breaking point. Mine came on a night out of town, during dinner, when I brought up the mileage money. Gary did not take the suggestion well. Something in him snapped, and the floodgates of verbal abuse opened wider than they ever had before. It got to me. I was 18, and I sat there fighting back angry tears while a grown man tore into me. Then he threatened my job. That was the moment something shifted in me. I wasn't thinking about revenge yet. I just wanted out. I'd already been quietly taking notes, hoping to transfer to a different crew. But the universe, or maybe just dumb luck, had other plans. The next morning, Gary was exactly where he always was, unconscious in the passenger seat, sleeping off the night before, while I drove us toward the job site. About 30 kilometers out, on the shoulder of the highway, I spotted a semi-truck. Its engine was running. The driver was standing outside, stretching his legs. An idea hit me, fully formed, almost cinematic in how clearly I could see it play out. Gary slept like the dead. He needed to be shaken awake with real intent. So when I pulled over, he didn't stir. I got out, walked up to the trucker, and asked him for a favor. He said yes. He climbed back into his cab to wait for my signal, and I walked back to Gary's truck. Carefully, quietly, I repositioned it. When I was done, we were parked nearly bumper to bumper with that massive Peterbilt, engine rumbling, headlights aimed dead ahead. I lit up my beacon. The trucker answered by flooding his headlights into our cab and laying on the air horn like he was trying to wake the dead. I added my own chorus, pounding Gary's horn and screaming at the top of my lungs, "We're going to die!" For less than a minute, that truck cab became the loudest, most terrifying place on earth. And Gary came apart. He shot upward, so hard he dented the ceiling of his own truck. The shock ripped through his entire body, and in the chaos of adrenaline and pure terror, he lost control of his bladder and bowels completely. His scream of pure horror melted into rage almost instantly, but he was shaking too hard to even get a coherent threat out of his mouth. I reversed the truck, peeled off down the highway, and gave the trucker a wave of thanks in my mirror. About 10 meters down the road, still catching his breath, Gary informed me, through gritted teeth, that he had dangerously high blood pressure and that what I'd just done could have given him a stroke. I want to be honest with you. Years later, after I went through paramedic school, I looked back and thought, yeah, actually he had a point. But at 18, I genuinely didn't understand what a stroke even was. I just started laughing. I couldn't stop. The angrier Gary got, the funnier it became, and the funnier it became, the harder I laughed, which only made him angrier. It was a vicious, beautiful cycle. I asked him straight-faced if that shade of red was normal for him. He spent the rest of the 20-minute drive torn between rage and the genuine fear of stroking out from the rage itself. The second we arrived at the site, Gary threw the door open, told me I was fired, and stormed off to call the company owner. I sat outside, smoked a cigarette, and let myself enjoy every second of that victory while I waited 4 hours for someone to come pick me up. Turns out, Gary wanted the police involved, actual attempted murder charges. The general manager talked him down. Gary told his version of the story, painting me as some kind of homicidal maniac. So on the ride back to the city, I told the GM the real story. All 3 months of it. The insults, the mileage money, the comment about my dad. He laughed. Hard. Turns out he was a genuinely decent guy running a company of about 100 employees, and he had no patience for Gary's nonsense once he heard the full picture. I kept my job. I just never worked with Gary again. Here's the thing about people like Gary. They mistake silence for weakness. They think that because you absorb the insults quietly, you'll absorb them forever. But everyone has a limit, and when you finally hit it, the punishment doesn't need to be cruel to be effective. Sometimes all it takes is holding up a mirror and letting someone feel, just for 60 seconds, exactly the kind of fear they've been dishing out for months. If this story gave you even a little bit of secondhand satisfaction, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the most satisfying moment of karma you've ever witnessed? And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe, because there are plenty more where this came from.